I'll never walk Sutton Wilderness in the dark again. The sun wouldn't rise for another hour when I leashed up my dog for our walk. You see, my wife and I started going to the gym on Mondays, Wednesdays and Fridays. Last week, our trainer wanted us to add cardio to our routine, so Tuesdays and Thursdays became our cardio days. Our gym was small, and with only one treadmill working at the moment, I opted to get my exercise later in the day via a hike through the nearby wilderness. I figured this would also be an excellent opportunity to walk our dog, Penny. Fall showed no signs of coming early to Oklahoma as we stepped outside to the 75-degree heat. With all of the lakes and the Gulf Stream, Oklahoma can get unbearably humid. On Tuesday, when I did a walk at 10 a.m., I felt sweaty enough to want to take a second shower from a 40-minute hike. Today, I opted to start at 6 a.m. before I'd shower and match my wife's time at the gym. Despite the dark, there were several cars parked in the lot for Sutton Wilderness. Goes to show that the Sutton Goat Man isn't real, I joked. I had heard of the urban legend about a goat man stalking the woods at night, but that was the extent of my knowledge until I listened to a local podcast that went into more depth. The host described the story as one that echoed other goatman stories across the nation. His research compared the sightings of woodland monsters like Bigfoot through a cultural lens, with people from British backgrounds familiar with ape men, werewolves from Germanic history, and the goatmen from the Dutch. Similar to other goatman stories, this creature existed near a hospital, or in the case of Sutton Wilderness, a psychiatric ward. The urban wilderness was once grounds for the Griffin Memorial Hospital, an old Central State mental hospital. As the hospital shrunk, the state turned the landscape into the park people enjoy today. According to the urban legends, the hospital found a baby deformed with horns to the point that they thought the child was a goat at first. The hospital cared for the baby, and as the child grew up and the landscape changed, the child decided to stay here. The podcast host noted that this would put the goat man well over 70 years old, and said that some people believe the spirit of the goat man is what haunts the woods. Regardless of the form, the legend warns that people will hear footsteps made by hooves coming from behind them. If a person walked faster or slower, the steps would match their pace, until one would feel hot breath on their neck, by which time you were too late. If you turned around, the goat man would grab you and drag you deep into the woods, never to be seen again. The main trail for the park was about 1.5 miles long, with the two main entrances looping back at a wooden pavilion. We took the path to our right, although it was dark and I could barely see with all of the tree coverage. I was more concerned about my dog eating something she shouldn't have than anything else. The city had widened the trails a couple of years ago to give people more space when crossing each other and reduce the tick population. My dog stopped. Her ears perked up and turned to the south towards the rhythmic beat of drums off in the distance. I tugged on her leash and assured her, "It's just the high school band practicing, Penny." I was over 1/3 of the way on the trail before I encountered my first person. They appeared to be an older gentleman, hard to say with the blue disposable face mask, long-sleeve shirt, pants, and fisher hat they wore. I nodded my head hello, and they walked past without saying a word. When we got to the long straight path near the pond, something behind us caught my dog's attention. I turned around, and there was a white light floating through the bushes, moving fast along the trail and getting closer. I'm ashamed to admit that my brain took a long moment before realizing this was a headlight from a bike. In my defense, bicycles were not allowed on the trails. I pulled Penny closer to me as we moved to the side and let them pass. Penny and I came to the final stretch of the woods, which had the thickest tree coverage. Penny's tail curled inwards as she got closer to my side. An educational sign about life in the woods highlighted the various animals one could find, such as bark beetles, ornate box turtles, cedar waxwings, bobcats, eastern wood rats, and downy woodpeckers. Back away from the sign was a hut made out of fallen tree branches. I always viewed this fairy house as something fun for kids to explore, but not today. There were pieces of the bike I saw earlier scattered on the ground. The bike looked like it had been mangled by some machine, as no person or creature could do that kind of damage. I turned on my phone's flashlight. While I stayed on the paved trail, I used the light to follow the bike pieces to the hut. Something moved inside. I cut away the shadows with my light and revealed a pair of green eyes reflecting at me. I ran, and so did Penny. I was struggling to keep up with her, but I had her on the leash still. Behind us, I heard what sounded like hooves matching my pace on the paved trail. I dared not to look back. The sun was rising as we made our escape out of the woods and back to the gazebo. With the sound of hooves gone and no warm breath on my neck, I stopped to catch my breath. Staying behind in the trees was someone about my height. I thought I saw horns like a goat, but as I tried to get a good look at them, they faded into the shadows. My GPS was hacked by malicious forces. Now I'm stranded in the woods, and I'm afraid there is no escape. My GPS was hacked by malicious forces. They are coming. I see the lights of their torches approaching, and I don't have much time left. Their demonic song chills me to the bone, and I'm afraid of what will happen if they get their hands on me. If someone finds this note, tell Rachel that I am sorry I won't see her again. Tell my parents what happened too. Now I am stranded in the woods, and I'm afraid there is no escape. Let me start from the beginning. I dropped Rachel back at home close to midnight. It was early fall and the leaves were starting to change. As she left the passenger side of the car, a strong wind blew her hair across her face. "I had a lot of fun tonight," I said. "Yes," she smiled. "Tonight was really nice. See you next weekend?" I tapped my steering wheel in anticipation. "Of course. See you then." She closed the passenger door and blew me a kiss. We met by accident at a mutual friend's party and really hit it off. It had been a long time since I had been on a date. After 7 years of being with my high school sweetheart, I almost forgot how to talk to women. But Rachel seemed really lovely. Everything was practically perfect, except for the fact that she lived over an hour from where I lived. She lived in a weird part of the state I was unfamiliar with, and I had to drive through the woods and farmland to get to her small town. I didn't mind though. I found the rural drive to be rather quaint. I had to travel through a complicated network of long, winding roads to get there, finally arriving in the quaint small town where she lived. Tonight, we went to see one of our mutually favourite comedians. We had gone on several dates. Sometimes we hiked around near her small town, or sometimes I took her to the big city to party. We had a wonderful time, and even the long drive back to her house was not too bad, since we talked the entire way. I watched her as she returned to her house. I sat there giddy with anticipation for our next date. Okay, only an hour to get home. I took out my GPS and typed in my home address. I looked at the clock and noticed that it was 12:45 a.m. Jesus Christ, I said. I backed the car out of the driveway and followed the directions of the GPS. Everything about the drive was unfamiliar in the dark. In the daytime, I was practically useless without my GPS, but in the pitch-black darkness of night, I was totally reliant on it. If my phone were to lose battery, I would be stranded until morning. As I drove through the trees, each one seemed to look identical to the last. "Turn left in 2 miles, said the GPS. "Really?" I said. I took a left and continued down that road. It didn't seem the right turn to make, but I supposed I was clueless, and the GPS knew what it was doing. It looked like the rest of the drive, so I didn't question the GPS. I continued for a while longer, traversing the complex twists and turns of the rural wooden roads. Driving at night was almost hypnotic. I enjoyed being alone with my thoughts as I went through the trees. After a while, I glanced down at the time and noticed that it was 1:30 in the morning. "What the hell?" I said. "I should be out of the woods and near civilization by now." I pulled the car over to look at my map. I wondered if I had put in the wrong address, but I saw that the destination was still my home. The map said that I had about 45 minutes until I was back. I put my phone back and concluded that the GPS must have taken me a different way. I was mildly annoyed at the extension of my journey, but continued driving the direction that the GPS took me. I felt further from civilization now than I ever had been before. There were no houses and no lights. It was just me in my car, alone on the dark roads at night. In front of me, all I saw was a short stretch of road and the trees. As I drove, it seemed like the twists and turns would continue endlessly. 15 minutes passed, and my destination still was 45 minutes away. 30 minutes passed, and I was still no closer to civilization. According to my GPS, by the time I should have been home, I was still deep in the unknown woods on this small road. "That's enough," I said. I pulled over and grabbed my phone. I opened an alternative GPS and entered my home location. It showed me where I was and said it was an hour and a half to get home. "Jesus Christ," I said. "I've been going in the wrong direction this whole time." The new GPS app told me that I could loop around a small side road in about 2 miles and then go back in the direction of my home. I continued forward into the night. When I had arrived at the loop, I turned into a small dirt road. It was supposed to loop around and cut back the other direction, but as I continued to drive forward, it became apparent that the road was straight and not curved. "That's it," I said. Whatever was going on with my phone, I knew that it was simply not working. There was 1 bar of service, so I decided the best thing I could do was call Rachel or one of my parents so maybe they could help find me. I clicked on my phone app, but it wouldn't open. Every time I clicked the little green icon, the phone screen glitched and returned to normal. I then tried to open my text app. The same thing happened. One by one, I clicked on app icons to try to open them, but I was met with the same thing. Nothing. I reset my phone to no avail. I concluded that my phone was busted. I decided to try my best to retrace my steps, and worse, I could sleep for a few hours until I hit daylight. I tried to turn around on the dirt road but realized there was a problem. The road was too small to complete a 3-point turn, and the trees were too close to the road for me to pull off to the side. I knew that my only options were to drive in reverse on a dangerous dark street, or drive forward until I found an appropriate place to turn around. I decided to continue forward. I pressed forward into the night, with the road becoming increasingly narrow. It seemed like there was nowhere for miles where I could turn around, and there were no driveways or even a sign of life. I began to breathe heavily. "Calm down," I said. I pulled the car into reverse and started to back slowly down the mountain road. I decided that my last resort was hitting reverse until I got back to the previous route. It was treacherous, but I knew that this was the best option. I checked and saw that my gas was starting to deplete. I had a good quarter tank, but I was nervous that I would run out and become stranded. It seemed like there was no other option but to try to get off this dirt road. Slowly but surely, I crept back the way I came on the dark mountain road. After about 15 minutes of this, I heard what sounded like music. Initially, I thought it was a distant animal or river, but I soon was able to make out the sound of drums and horns. It sounded like a demonic march, with elements of an atonal harmony all held together by a standard rhythm. I thought I had lost my marbles, so I got out of the car in the night and tried to catch my breath. Outside of my car, the music was louder, and I saw the faint glow of fire in the distance. "Get a grip," I said. I slapped myself in the face trying to regain a semblance of sanity, but the music grew ever louder, and the glow grew brighter. I knew that I needed to get away from whatever was approaching, so I got back in my car and stepped on the gas to go forward. I drove into the night, away from that horrid music, screaming. I had no idea what was ahead, but I only hoped that this road would loop around and I could get away from that. Soon the glow seemed as if it were all around me, and I swore that the music was no longer to my rear, but came from all angles. No matter, I just needed to keep moving. Ahead there was a bend in the road, and I slowed down to not fall off the side. As I pulled my car around the bend, I saw them. In front of me, there were 100 people dressed in animal masks waiting for me. Some held torches, while some played instruments. Behind them was a massive wooden object that resembled a bear. There was a cell midway up the bear's body, with ladders leading to it. I knew that the bear was where I would be placed if I did not escape. I leapt out of my car and ran down the side of the hill. There was only one direction to my right without the glow of flames, and I knew that was where I needed to head. I ran through the darkness, struggling not to hit my head on a branch. Behind me, the music grew louder, and I knew that they were in the woods, looking for me. I ran for what felt like forever, until I lost my footing and fell to the ground. My ankle is sprained or broken. I don't know what it is, but I can't move it. There is no way I will escape, but I'm writing this letter hoping that somebody will find it and share it with others. Please tell my parents and siblings I love them. Tell Rachel that I wish things could have gone differently. My name is redacted. Rachel's last name is redacted. And my parents are redacted. Please tell them how I died and warn others about whatever presence is in the woods that may wait for them. I know now that whatever wanted me to come out here hacked my phone and led me into a trap. There is no escape now. The letter ends there. I found this crumpled up piece of paper as I was hiking through the woods and decided to share it to warn others. I blanked out the family's names for anonymity and contacted them about the affair. There is an ongoing investigation to figure out what happened, but I have washed my hands of the matter. All I know is that I am never trusting my GPS again. Signed, PH. A huge thank you to everyone who allowed me to narrate their stories, which you can find in the description below.